Welcome to It's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I am joined by my co-host, Mr. C.H. Siddons.
Hello. Welcome back.
That's the third time you've said that.
This is the third opening you've recorded. Are you going to introduce everybody? Keep going.
And Mr. Peter Crable.
Hi, Bob.
Bobby Diz.
Bobby Dodd.
All right. It's good to see you guys, and it's good to be back with our listeners. It's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform. You can find us at Ed's Not Dead PC on Twitter, and of course, check out the webpage, edsnotdead.com. Boys, this is the pre-holiday show. We're going to take a little break and come back in the new year, right?
Yes,
That's right. That's right. I would like to say that since we're receiving our first rounds of snowfall here in the DC region, that I did say this earlier in the spring that the snow days would be no longer.
You did predict that.
I did write a post on that.
Which is really, and I was like, at the time, I was like, yeah, let's post this. And I'm like, oh, what dribble that was. God.
Well, the nor'easter that we just got was a big disappointment for the Mid-Atlantic region.
Meanwhile, Binghamton got 40 and a half inches.
I know. It was there's such a lack of equity with snow.
It's ridiculous. It actually makes me annoyed. People are all asking about it.
It makes me annoyed too.
Yes. Every meeting I was in this week. What do you think about the snow coming up? I was like, I'll believe it when I see it.
So this morning in Maryland, for our listeners, would we have had a 2-hour delayed opening or no school?
2-hour delay.
2-hour delay.
2-hour delay. That's what I thought too.
Yeah, and an early release yesterday.
Yeah, not even a 2-hour delay or an early. God, it just feels like just this.
We're being cheated.
It just never gets old. The going into school late or like getting out early. You know, when the kids are like, yeah, and like really on the inside, you're like, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing.
There were several superintendents who were being shouted out across the nation who were ceremoniously giving snow days out, even though they're all virtual learning. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Pretty magnanimous of them.
Yeah.
So let me read you something that one of those superintendents set out to the Jefferson County schools community. Are you ready?
Let's hear it.
I am ready.
Is this Virginia?
I think Jefferson County is. I think it's Virginia.
Okay.
For generations, families have greeted the first snow day of the year with joy. It is a time of renewed wonder at all the beautiful things that each season holds, a reminder of how fleeting a childhood can be, an opportunity to make some memories with your family that you hold on to for life. For all of these reasons and many more, Jefferson County schools will be completely closed for tomorrow, December 16th, in honor of the first snow day of the year.
Wow.
Closed for students, closed for virtual, closed for staff. It has been a year of seemingly endless loss and the stress of trying to make up for that loss. For just a moment, we can all let go of the worry of making up for the many things we missed by making sure this is one thing our kids won't lose this year.
Wow.
So please enjoy a day of sledding and hot chocolate and cozy fires. Take pictures of your kids in snow hats. They will outgrow by next year and read books that you have wanted to lose yourself in but haven't had the time. We will return to the serious and urgent business of growing up on Thursday. But for tomorrow, go build a snowman.
Oh.
Wow.
Sincerely, Bondi Shea Gibson, EDD Superintendent.
Wow. Can we get them on the show?
Fan of Dr. Shea Gibson. We should
get
them on the show. Get them on the show. Yes. That was well written and just perfect, wasn't it?
It was perfect. I felt like I was reading Calvin and Hobbes. It reminds me of that's what I would read when I was a kid in snow days. Snow days equal Calvin and Hobbes for some reason.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, we've got a great show tonight. We are fortunate to have Mr. Greg Cruey, who is currently a middle school social studies teacher in West Virginia. There recently, in November, was a really fascinating piece on him, fellas, in the Washington Post about how he has thread the needle with the current political climate in his classroom. He is an unapologetic Democrat, and many people in his town know that he's a Democrat, and
they know where he lives.
Yeah, and he I think he openly describes where he lives as deep red Trump country, and so he's going to hopefully come on the show and talk about what it's like to teach kids during this volatile political time that we're in. So we're excited to have him on the show. But before we get into that, let's get into our first piece, which was an op-ed in the Post. We need a Marshall Plan for our schools. Didn't I say that? Didn't I say we needed a Marshall Plan for our schools? Do you recall that?
I do. I
sure did.
When it came up, I was like, is this legit or not?
Yeah. So I was scooped. I could have written this op-ed. So we need a Marshall Plan for our schools, and we need it now. It is authored by Richard Carranza, Austin Buettner, and Janice Jackson. Carranza, Buettner, and Jackson are superintendents of the nation's 3 largest school districts, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, respectively. So the upshot of this piece is, I'll read you a quote, "It's time to treat the dire situation facing public schools with the same federal mobilization we have come to expect for other national emergencies such as floods, wildfires, and hurricanes. A major coordinated nationwide effort, imagine a Marshall Plan for schools, is needed to return children to public schools quickly in the safest way possible." So the authors go on to talk about a massive federal relief package for schools that would cover things like basic building blocks for safe, healthy, and welcoming school environments, and infrastructure for high quality teaching and learning. And actually, they didn't have a lot of other creative ideas.
I was going to say that. That was my one critique, was it's very white bread.
Yeah. So
we need to have money.
I want to dig a little deeper into the piece. School-based coronavirus testing, contact tracing, mental health support for students. That's big to help them with the significant trauma they have experienced, and funding for in-person instruction next summer. It was a little bit of a kind of a hodgepodge or a laundry list of relief practices or strategies. But you get the point. There needs to be a massive federal effort, and I assume led by the federal government to help students recover what they've lost during the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this? Just open-ended right out of the gate.
Yeah, I was hoping for something, I think, a little bit more visionary and all-encompassing. So I kind of had to take a step back and be like, all right, well, what are they asking for? And I think that the things that they are asking for, maybe it's more like a reasonable ask and it's not a pie in the sky type ask. But then I was like, but it's like a bare minimum. Like, man, if we can't get this stuff out to schools and to teachers and educators, it's like it's a problem. So, I mean, testing, yeah, there should definitely be rapidly available testing. There should be PPE. And then dealing with when kids do come back. I mean, we just don't know. I think we don't really, we think we know. I think we don't really know what kids have been going through and what the sort of short to medium term effects of this whole last 9 months is going to have on them. So I'm certainly for about that. But I think the thing that I would like to see when you conjure up the Marshall Plan,
I know where you're going, Krabs.
It's just something a little bit more all-encompassing, I think. And now the Marshall Plan, I was a history major, so excuse me.
Oh.
So the Marshall Plan allocated, according to Wikipedia, about $15 billion towards Western Europe for the rebuilding of now is primarily towards infrastructure. And it seems like a lot, but $15 billion, they talked about this costing $128 billion to do those 3 or 4 things that they listed. seems like a lot of money. But when you look at the Paycheck Protection Program that was enacted in April for like 2 weeks, any guesses on how many billions of dollars that was? Just guess.
40 billion.
No. $349 billion.
Million with an M?
No. Billion. Come on. The government doesn't spend money in millions.
I think the school improvement grants, the SIGs from TARP, were what, 13 billion, and that was in 2008 or 9?
Something like that, yeah. So to me, the things that they're asking for are totally reasonable, are totally doable, and totally acceptable, and should be, I would hope, passed without a lot of fuss. But they're Band-Aids, you know what I mean? They're total reactionary to what's happening, which again should happen. But I would love to see something as part of a bigger, broader mission.
Systemic.
Be a part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we can say enough about the amount of resources that schools already needed prior to the pandemic. So, having enough counselors per school, we're way below the recommended average of how many counselors we should have per school. School psychologists and school personnel who work with students in terms of socio-emotional learning, having, it costs money to have teachers not teach classes. So like in terms of staffing, schools need more money and districts need more money to pay teachers, frankly, not to teach and to plan and to be taking care of the students that they already are teaching, because teaching 150 students is just it's not manageable in a regular time, and it's not manageable now. So, I think we do need a Marshall Plan. This particular article was a little disappointing because you have ostensibly the three most important school leaders in the entire country, except for Dear Betsy, of course, and they're providing a milquetoast op-ed about just getting money, but without any specific and innovative ideas on how to really bring it forward beyond just the 125 billion.
I'm with you. I'll defer to you as history majors.
Hello.
As
I'm not a history major.
Help me out here. I mean, I don't know a lot about the Marshall Plan, but this doesn't really. I feel like they kind of misused the Marshall.
They totally misused it. It has nothing to do with the Marshall Plan.
Yeah,
it's a reaction to COVID.
This is about getting us back into school. This is not. This is not recovery from what has happened to schools.
No.
And that's what I thought I was going to read about, which is like you're pointing out, both of you, some kind of innovative, long-term, far-reaching recovery plan to build schools back up.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't say anything in here. What's going to happen? And we know this is going to happen when local and state budgets drop because tax revenue is trickling in a year from now, 2 years from now, and school systems can't hire more teachers. I mean, there should be so much more in this about how to make schools more robust to help kids make up for what they've lost.
Yep.
So one of the most dangerous things I think that can happen with funding for schools is reactionary programs that solve immediate short-term issues or address to short-term issues, but don't really change or address any of like the root cause issues, because then people can come back and say the people that are looking for like, we already spend too much money on schools, the Betsy DeVosses of the world. This is ammunition for them, where, we spent $128 billion on schools, and what did we get for it?
They're going to say that no matter what, and no matter how many.
I know, but I'm just saying the answer in this case is like, we got kids back in safely and they didn't die. I mean, that's pretty good. But then it's, what about our math tests on PISA or, whatever the next kind of thing is. And, one of the things that I was hoping for, and I'm still hoping for at some point, from the Biden administration or for whoever the next Secretary of Education is it's as I mentioned, an all-encompassing plan. And, kind of like one of the models that you look back on, or that I looked back on to say that this is something that I'm thinking about is Lyndon Johnson is part of his Great Society. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
I'm not familiar with this man.
No, and I've not heard anything about the Great Society.
So it was his plan to eliminate poverty. So the war on poverty and eliminate racial injustices, right? And so it was a lot of things. It was part of the education was Head Start. There was volunteer programs. There was Job Corps. It built on a lot of the ideas of Roosevelt's New Deal. So there was initiatives across the board, not just in education, that were all hand in hand working together to address issues. And like how we treat education now is like, education is just going to be this silo or this bucket. And housing policy is going to be this silo or this bucket, and kind of so on and so forth down the line. So that's what I'm really hoping to see, a true Marshall Plan that really takes into account things beyond just the four walls of the school building.
Yeah. I mean, the Great Society got electricity to parts of Appalachia that had never had it.
Right.
I mean, when the school closure first hit in March, when the pandemic was really, beginning, we talked on this show about broadband internet access.
Yep.
There's nothing in this article about something like that in the event that we go through this again. I mean, because I do think one of the vestiges of the shutdown is going to be online learning for students, whether to catch them up or just as a part of the way we educate kids in the future.
Yeah.
So would you all consider things like extended school days and an 11th month in the school year to pay for those kinds of things for in this Marshall Plan?
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, we should be moving to a full year school schedule. It's way past due for that. And that's it's going to cost money to pay for teachers and to pay for salaries. And the amount of time that needs to be made up, I don't think that needs to be. I struggle with this because it's like, yeah, students are learning, they're losing learning, but I also don't want to come back and do a full bum rush of. I'm not really sure how to say it, but to a point where it's so overwhelming for teachers and students because we already feel bad about where the kids are as it stands.
And to Crable's point, how about higher education? So if you look at the data just locally from in the DMV, for example, and you look at the spike in the number of D's and E's that students have. Well, those D's and E's are not going to go away. They're a part of a kid's transcript, right? So that affects their ability to go beyond high school and where they get to go to school. So where are colleges and universities going to help at all or change anything that they do to work with K-12? That, to me, Crable, that would be a part of the plan.
Well, I think they're going to
have to. I'm going to throw it out there and say no, they're not going to.
So I saw an article today, though, that said enrollment plummeted first quarter of this year.
Yeah.
Among 4-year colleges and universities, but actually really drastically amongst community colleges.
Wow.
So I do think that they're feeling the impact of it because a lot of kids are saying, well, why do this experience online? I could just push it off a year. I could work. I could do this, whatever the case may be. Right. Take a gap year. I don't know. I don't know what the kids do these days.
They're on TikTok.
Yeah, make TikTok videos.
Yeah.
But they did see a drastic decline, and so I do wonder if it's going to be like a one-off decline where once the pandemic is under control, vaccines are more widespread, and then everybody comes flocking back, or whether they are going to have to do a little bit of sort of soul searching, I guess, to say, is business as usual going to continue to work based on all of the crazy mitigating circumstances of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a deep decline in enrollment because families can't afford it, or they're afraid they're not going to be able to afford it. So they're going straight to work. I have a lot of students who are past students who had to go straight into the workforce because they don't have the funds to actually do that. So they're staying with their families because of health reasons or whatever to take care of them, and they're working.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? We are going to ask our guest Greg Cruey when we come back about he's in the thick of it in West Virginia. He might have some ideas about how to support schools in the future as we try to bounce back from the pandemic. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with special guest Greg Cruey. All right, fellas, we are incredibly excited to welcome teacher Mr. Greg Cruey on Ed's Not Dead. We all three, I think, recently read an article in the Washington Post, a great feature on the work that Greg is doing as a middle school teacher in West Virginia, and how he has been front and center to this national debate, political debate, and he's had to mediate it in the classroom with students. So we're happy to have Greg on the show. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, I'm going to tell our listeners a little bit about Greg. He's a middle school teacher in West Virginia. He has a variety of certifications, although we need to make sure he gets that admin certification re-upped. He's worked at every grade level.
Maybe we'll support the $50.
Yeah. That's right. From one of our big endorsers.
This podcast is losing money, so I don't know if we could support that.
Greg is a union activist who serves as president of his county's local for the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. He moderates the West Virginia page for the Badass Teachers Association, which I want to join. Greg is a career changer who at the age of 60 has about 20 years in public schools. He has a BA in psychology and an MS in education from Marshall University, a certificate in educational leadership, and a graduate diploma in general linguistics from the Australian National University. He has lived on 4 continents. Once again, Greg Cruey, welcome to Ed's Not Dead.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's jump in. You recently had the article that I referenced in the Post describing what it's like to teach students about the election in a deep red Trump area. Can you tell us some of the changes you've noticed about how students have reacted?
The main thing is that they're more engaged this year than they've ever been when it comes time to teach that. They were very engaged last year when we had all the candidates in the primaries, and I try and talk about issues. And I had lots of fans for some of the candidates. Andrew Yang had a cult following in the middle school at my, and
the Yang Gang.
That's it. That was it. And there were a few others, but this year it's been less curiosity and enthusiasm and more something more intense than that. Passion, vigor. I don't know what to call it. It's been a little bit more emotional.
So one of the things you wrote about in the article was, as a teacher and certainly as a social studies teacher, you look at sources and reputable sources and really analyzing that. Is this any different than like middle schoolers in the past? I mean, I would not necessarily say the middle schoolers are vetting sources, with vigor. At any point, but have you noticed any particular change when it comes to that, or how have you tried to address that?
I can't say that I've noticed more interest in sources per se. The kids hear rumors repeated, and they come to school either to tell me that these things are true or to ask me whether I think these things are true. And you guys know the vast number of conspiracy theories that are out there right now. Is a computer system changing votes? Did dead people vote in Michigan? Are there alternate electors? Are there yada, yada, yada? I could go on. And you ask them and put the burden on them and say, well, where are you hearing that? Well, can you show me a story and we can look at the story? And they're like, dang, homework. So, that's really, we end up shifting instead of saying, what do you think is true? What do you think is true? And spreading rumors in a circle, we end up saying, let's look that up and see who thinks that's true and who doesn't. And the kids, it's human nature. The kids would rather keep repeating the rumors in a circle than actually go and find out what's true, because the latter is work.
Right.
And what do you, as the trusted adult in the room, like the students trust you, you have personal relationships with students. So, oftentimes, as we know, those personal relationships transcend political views in a lot of ways. So how do the students treat, the more critical aspect of trying to find out if something is true or not, or debunking those things?
They listen to what I have to say. My first sentence about half the time is, well, let's go Google that. And let's see what we find. One of my biggest struggles is convincing them that Google is not a source. Google is a list of possible sources, and you have to decide which one. Because most of the time, if the child is left his own devices, all he does is look at Google. He never clicks on anything. And so I have to teach him to actually click on something and go read it. We're blessed in as much as we have some pretty good technology in most of our classrooms. There's a big smart display up on the wall in almost every room in the school. And so we have the resources and the ability to just say, let's go look that up.
So how kind of following up on that piece, like how transparent are you with your own political views and opinions with students?
I don't think that's really a choice on my part. They show up knowing what I think and who I'm for. Social media is transparent for me, whether I want to be or not. And my choices are to either participate in the system or to hide and be quiet because somebody might find out what I believe. The latter doesn't really seem like an option to me. So, I come into school and the kids tell me what I think, or ask me, is it true that you like Biden? Just be honest with us, Mr. Crewy. And it's not like, they know where I live. We used to have a bus driver who would do most of the field trips, and my house is visible from the U.S. highway that the kids go down to get anywhere. And the bus driver would blow her horn and point out the window and say, and there's where Mr. and Mrs. Crewy live. So the kids know which house is mine and what sign I have in my yard, and transparency really isn't an option.
So let me just take that, Greg, a step further. Because we have this conversation, the three of us, and then we have it online with some other teachers that listen to the show, and we have online exchanges with. What are your thoughts on whether teachers should be transparent about their political views with students? And then do you think teachers can do this in ways that don't compromise a culture of free expression or safety or truth in the classroom?
In a deep red state, in where I am, nobody who, if we had the teachers that we have that support President Trump and wanted to see him reelected, nobody would ask them that question. They would be part of the same club, group, whatever, clique as the kids. And the kids would, it's like, you like Trump? I like Trump. You like Trump? I like Trump. And if you say no, all of a sudden that question comes up.
Got it.
So there's an issue of equity there.
Yeah.
What is it that makes it wrong for me to not hide the fact that I support Biden when other teachers in the building don't hide the fact that they support Trump? I don't think it's possible to hide those sorts of things at this point. But more importantly, I don't think it's fair to the kids. I don't think that the children that I have, I'm the parent on the spot to a group of kids in my community that over half of them don't live with either biological parent. Wow. They live with a grandparent or a foster parent or the relative that would take them or whatever. And I am in some ways a parental figure for them. And I have to be open and share my life at a number of levels, and I'm not talking about forming inappropriate relationships or, but it's more than just it's not like they're little bitty college students and I'm teaching a class. I'm responsible for their well-being, not just their education.
Right.
And I have to be personal about that. I have to be willing to be known if I'm going to build relationships with them.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, the experience that you just described about kind of like everybody being out in the open, and then the question coming up, for example, if you say, you support Biden, is that something that maybe happened in 2012 or 2008, or is it a more recent phenomenon in your experience?
Well, I should make clear that, I enjoy telling people this. I am a recovering math teacher. I have been a social studies teacher for 5 years.
Okay.
So it happened some in 2016. And, the candidate then was President Trump. In 2015, my first year as a social studies teacher, I was actually in a commercial for Hillary.
Oh, wow.
They flew me to New Hampshire to spend 2 days at an education roundtable, and I was in a video with her that circulated on YouTube. And the kids find that. The kids know that's out there because that's the nature of social media.
Yeah. So did you take her emails or? I'm sorry. Is that too soon? Is it too soon?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
All right.
I asked her a question, and the question was, will you, if you're elected, support community schools? And she said yes. And I hope Joe Biden picks up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue for the next question.
That is a good segue. So one of the things, we've been doing this show now, Greg, for 4 years. And so it's obviously overlapped with the most recent administration. And back when we started the show, the three of us as public educators all had the sense that we had just gone through a period of time, a lot of which happened during a Democratic 8-year administration where teachers were demonized nationally. Charters were embraced. There were unions were being battered to and fro. But then over the course of the last few years, we've seen that tide turn a little bit, and we've seen a crest of sympathy and support towards teachers, culminating for support for teacher strikes across the country, which we've documented on the show over the last few years. What's been your experience with your community stance towards teachers recently?
Going back and thinking over the last 3 years, 4 years, we had a lot of support during the strike. I haven't really seen that fade, but all relationships at this point seem more distant because we're now in a situation where teachers, the public doesn't get in the building anymore. It's like the communication that I have with people is email, Facebook, or if you want something really heartwarming and intimate, you get to talk to them on the telephone for a few minutes. Every relationship seems more distant, but I don't think that translates into a loss of support. During the strike, we had lots of support.
Yeah,
that's great.
So,
go ahead.
So you had mentioned, I want to kind of, our last sort of topic here is school reform. You mentioned community schools. So you wrote the largest community schools innovation grant in West Virginia that helped hire the first full-time community school facilitator in the state. So tell us a little bit more about that in community schools, and then if you could just kind of like segue into any thoughts about school reform in general.
Okay. I heard one of the past podcasts you guys were talking about the burden that gets placed on people on schools to do more. And when I think of community schools, I want that burden. It's not that burden is the problem. That burden to me is probably the solution, or at least part of it for public education. I'd like to be funded to serve those purposes. I'd like to see schools, especially in poor neighborhoods and rural neighborhoods, be one-stop shops. Yeah. I'd like to see medical centers set up inside of schools, and I'd like to see counseling, trauma counseling. And we have that. We don't have a medical center at my school. We worked very hard to get one and came up short on that. But we do see lots of trauma counseling. We have a dentist that shows up at our school and provides services right there in the building. Wow. For students, and those sorts of things in rural communities in particular are what will be the life of the school. And to me, it's like, the school is the perfect spot for that. The grant that we wrote paid for services and for the salary of somebody to coordinate those services for 3 years. I think it was a $300,000 grant. The nature of public-private partnerships is part of our problem. As soon as the money was drawn down, it became more difficult for private partners to cooperate with the school system, and those difficulties were structural. They were legal barriers that are there in code. It's not like somebody changed or whatever. It was accounting law and personnel law and things of that nature. School improvement, the point of community schools is that school improvement is a social issue first, and it's an educational issue second, because the things that lead to poor academic achievement are mostly outside the school. Whether you're talking about poverty and unemployment or poor nutrition, family instability, healthcare, and addiction issues, which we have lots of. Sure. McKinney-Vento homelessness and inadequate housing, high rates of educational disabilities, those things are rooted outside the school. How we measure school improvement at this point lacks validity and reliability and is very shallow and short-sighted. We measure it with a test. Yeah. And we change the test every 3 to 4 years so that we can't consistently say, see how you were doing 5 years ago. It's like, I don't know how you make that transition. So to me, making schools a community service location, a one-stop shop, is part of the solution. It's not a burden, it's the goal.
Well said. Amen.
Yeah.
I guess that standardized test doesn't measure whether a kid has adequate dental or medical care.
No, does it care? No.
Go ahead, Greg. You had something to say.
Well, I started to say, the biggest issue we face is with the underlying assumption to the very phrase school reform. Because, I tell people, you reform a delinquent, you reform a drunk. Why not just say that we're going to make some progress and admit that we're working in a field of expanding knowledge and that we might need new approaches and new standards in the future?
Because that's like 30 words, Greg.
Yeah, well,
school reform is 2 words.
And I mean, just the attitude that underlies that, that's whenever somebody starts out with the phrase school reform, I tense up at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think we all agree that's a myth out there that we're not quite sure when it started, but that public schools needed to be reformed. Yeah. And it lives on, unfortunately. Greg, tell our listeners where they can find you online or anywhere else.
I'm on Facebook, and just search for me by name. There's only 1 or 2 of us in the world. Greg Cruey, Cruey. I'm on Twitter, but I don't tweet very much. I mostly use it to read what other people say. That's pretty much it. I have a YouTube channel, but half of that is church music.
All right. Well, it's been great to have you on Ed's Not Dead, Greg. We're honored to have you as a guest, and I know I speak on behalf of the fellows that we're impressed with what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate that.
You're serving students in the best way, and we'll keep tabs on you and get you on the show again in the future. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I'm now, before I go, y'all always play that thing where you make fun of standardized testing by asking somebody multiple choice questions. I've been dreading that all day. You're not going to do that to me?
Let's see. I do have a quiz about advanced placement.
Okay.
Hey, Greg, you should consider yourself fortunate. I'm glad you've listened to the show and listened to what people have to go through, but you got off.
I think we reached an apex last show or 2 shows ago where every question was like a 4-paragraph question.
It was. I got a lot of flack for it.
So we took a break, but
okay.
All right, Greg. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Happy holidays, and thanks for coming on the show.
You too. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Welcome back to Ed's Not Dead. I'm Robbie Dodd. I am still here with my co-hosts, Casey
Much to your chagrin,
Peter Crable.
Hey.
Special thanks to Greg Cruey. He was awesome, wasn't he, fellas?
He was, yeah.
It was great.
He tweeted about our interview already, like right after he got off.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And he said that he doesn't really use Twitter. He just follows what other people say. But
you guilted him into it.
Wowie wee wah.
Hey, what happened with the quiz that Mr. Siddons was supposed to have for Mr. Cruey?
Yeah, I thought.
What happened?
Don't we usually do that?
I've taken a hiatus from quizzes this week for all parties because of the way that I was treated by my co-host last time.
I thought at the bottom of the show notes there was one for me and Robbie, wasn't there?
No, I've decided to. I've mixed that one.
Is
that how you've won the quizzes in the past? You cheated.
I haven't won any quizzes.
You cheated?
I've gotten 0 on like the last 3 quizzes.
Well.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll get Mr. Siddons. We'll get Mr. Cruey back on the show, and you'll have a quiz for him next time.
I will.
He was an excellent guest. I think it was fascinating to hear about his work with students in West Virginia. He's doing the heavy lifting, and we hadn't had a teacher on in quite a while, had we?
He's followed by Barack Obama.
Really?
And Randy Weingarten.
Well,
there's a bunch of pictures of him and Randy out there.
And he's followed by Edutopia, who also follows me. What?
Well, all right then.
Edutopia follows you?
Edutopia follows me.
Okay, that's he just went down the rabbit hole on his phone.
I did.
We lost him. All right, so if you haven't noticed, President-elect Biden, he is the president-elect.
Finally.
The electoral college let some white smoke go from their building, and he's now going to be the next president of the United States. He is rapidly filling all of those important cabinet positions, and one of which he has not filled yet is the Secretary of Education. And as a result of this election, we lost one of the most popular segments of our show, Dear Betsy.
She's not going far.
I'm not sure we're going to mock the new Secretary of Education like we did Betsy over the last 4 years. But there are 2 folks, at least according to the Washington Post, that have emerged as front runners. Are you ready, fellas?
I'm ready.
All right. The first is Leslie T. Fenwick, Dean of the Howard University School of Education and a professor of educational policy and leadership. And the second is Miguel Cardona, who last year was named the top education official in Connecticut. Not quite sure. I don't know if that's a title, top education official in Connecticut.
It is a little strange that they didn't just say superintendent or,
The Post points out the situation remains fluid and no decisions have been made. Mr. Crable, that supports your theory that these are just names that are potentially being thrown out. But Biden promised, as you'll recall, to choose a public school educator as secretary, which the Post says raised expectations that the nominee will come from the world of K-12 schools. He's also expected to name a person of color to the post, and most of the people considered have been Black or Latino. Fenwick is a Black woman and Cardona is a Latino man. Both have experience as classroom teachers, though Fenwick has worked as a dean and a scholar in higher ed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Fenwick has been fairly outspoken about education reform initiatives from the past, namely Race from the Top during the Obama administration. So that's garnered some attention. And here's a quote from Fenwick. These schemes are often viewed as new and innovative, but when you look at the history of these schemes, and I use the word schemes purposefully, hey, this reminds me of what Greg Crewy said. You find that they are rooted in resistance to the Brown legal decision. That was referencing schemes that drain money from public schools, driven by people looking to profit from public education. Mr. Siddons, you'll like this. Fenwick was a middle school science teacher.
That's right.
And a rookie teacher of the year in Toledo, her hometown. So she has walked the walk, if you will, right?
And I think she got her elementary ed, one of her degrees from UVA.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Cardona was named Connecticut's education commissioner last year. He began his career, let's hear it for elementary, as a fourth grade teacher. And he became the youngest principal in the state at 28. He almost beat my dad.
And he actually became Connecticut became the first state to require school or high schools to offer courses in Black and Latino studies, which I thought was pretty awesome.
And he was principal of the year in 2012. So these are both educational leaders that have earned their chops in the classroom in public schools and administratively. So it's these are two possibilities. What are your reactions to Cardona and Fenwick?
I'm particularly intrigued by Leslie Fenwick, just because it would be such a stark departure from the Obama era policies, which obviously Biden was a part of. And I wonder if even the fact that she's considered in the running, if that is sort of an implicit recognition that some of the policies that they pursued were wrong-headed, maybe is a good term.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong-headed is a very kind of old person, but good term.
Yeah. And so I think that is particularly interesting to me. So I don't know, because it would be, there is such an interesting, and I've talked about this before, an interesting dynamic when it comes to like charter schools and school choice, where so many cities, which are predominantly Democrat, have embraced school choice. But then now there's a big backlash against school choice from some people, but I'm not sure whether like that's Democrats or Republicans or urban or rural. So I just think it would bring a really interesting dichotomy because we know what it wouldn't be. We know that they wouldn't embrace those programs, but I don't know what they would embrace. And kind of going back to the first statement, I think that is fairly intriguing to me to say, well, I know what we're not going to do, and we're not going to do that. So it kind of opens the possibilities for what else it could be. I think with Miguel Cardona, I did a little bit of reading on him. He seems a little bit more of an unknown, kind of like a newcomer to the scene. I mean, how the Post article framed it was he has put a lot of emphasis on getting kids back into the school building, and that maybe his short-term expertise would be kind of with that mission of getting everyone back in school. So Biden recently said he wants all kids back in school by May 1st. So I wonder if that kind of brought him onto the scene or what. And beyond that, just from what I could read, he's written pretty extensively and wrote his doctoral dissertation about English language learners. and about kind of doing better for English language learners systematically and programmatically as well. But look, I'm interested in all the people whose names are being bandied about. They also brought up Johanna Hayes, who we talked about on the show. They talked about Michael Lomax, President and Chief Executive of the United Negro College Fund, Eloy Ortiz Oakley, Chancellor of the California Community Colleges System. I think I'm just intrigued, and I would hope that we don't go back to the I can't even think of what
Arnie Duncans.
Not even Arnie Duncan per se, but just what was the policy ESSA and just some of the stuff that just didn't, it just
race
sucked.
To the top.
It didn't do anything. You know what I mean?
Well, ESSA was the half-hearted extension of Race to the Top.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, the horse was out of the barn by the time ESSA came along, and there was not really any stomach for federal education policy at that point. Two other candidates inside the Beltway, as they say, that have come up and have gotten a lot of attention are Lily Escalante Garcia, who stepped down in September as president of NEA, and of course our friend of Ed's Not Dead, Randy Weingarten, longtime president of the American Federation of Teachers. Apparently, Ms. Garcia has made it pretty clear she wants the job. Randy, who's not low-key about much, but has apparently been low-key about interest in this position.
No, I would like to talk about Leslie Fenwick a little bit before we move on to the.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may, she is currently professor at Howard University. I think her promotion to Ed Secretary would say a lot in a lot of different ways. One of which is the kind of support that we as a society and as a country need to provide HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities need. We need someone like Ms. Fenwick, Dr. Fenwick, who would be an incredible advocate for HBCUs from the top. And one of the things that we mentioned on the previous show was there were some comments that I got in a Twitter reply back about why there was someone advocating for, we need someone from higher education to be the Ed Secretary. And my question was, why? Why is that important? And a bulk of the money that goes into the Department of Education actually goes to higher education. So having someone like Dr. Fenwick at the Department of Education, I think would send an incredibly powerful message that HBCUs are necessary, they are important, and they need to be funded and supported by our education department from the very top.
You know, one of the things that has kind of crossed my mind in all of this is how big of a role do we want the federal government to have in schools? And actually, I didn't get a chance to ask Greg Cruey this. I was wanting to, didn't quite get the chance, but you know, he talked about community schools, and that's pretty like hyper local. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
an epicenter for the community where kids come where families come for all variety of services. I don't know, you know, and I'm not saying like, I'm not sure, like, I think it's a bad idea, but I'm just not sure how much federal money is involved in that and whether federal money should be involved in that, or if the federal money was to be involved in that, like how many strings would be attached. And in some ways, and it's almost like perverse to say, but like, it's kind of been nice the last 4 years, not having new initiatives, not having, new meetings to go to. I mean, Robbie, like, how many steering committee meetings have you gone to where you've talked about AYP and you've had to look at individual kids and whether they met 3 or 4 out of the 5 different subcategories? You know, like, that stuff sucks. You know, and that
I do think that
is part and parcel of the federal government education reform.
There is certainly,
all right, so
there is a lot of funding that comes.
You've just described
districts.
2 phenomena. Mr. Siddons, I'm talking. The first you described as the last 4 years is what I would term neglect. What you described,
benign neglect or just neglect?
No, neglect. No, not benign neglect. There was nothing benign about Betsy DeVos's.
Not benign.
It was malignant
of public
Neglect.
schools, and what you talked about prior to that was abuse. So we've had abuse and we've had neglect. I mean, No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top in some ways were both coercive and abused public schools. And then we had an education secretary who just completely neglected them.
Yeah. So,
no, I don't think neglect was a good thing. I just because we didn't get any attention doesn't mean, the schools didn't get helped over the last 4 years. And no, I don't miss those kinds of meetings. But to your point, I mean, Title I is a huge federal program. Title I strikes at the heart of supporting students who are in poverty in public schools locally. I definitely think there's a federal role. I'm not saying I know a lot about community schools, but I think the federal government could support those.
And there's block grants that are provided to schools from the federal government that funded my previous position as a teacher coach. I would have to, I would get the things that you have to sign for the federal funds that come through. I don't know if it was Title IV or if it was I can't remember exactly what it was, but there are block grants that are provided by the Department of Education that I think need to continue. And I think the more that we have that kind of money coming through and allowing the districts and local districts to choose how they use that money in the certain scopes that are provided through ESSA, I think that's positive. I think having Race to the Top or anything like that coercive accountability is not helpful for schools.
You used my phrase, Mr.
I did, even though you interrupted me.
I think to your point, certainly all Title I and there's Title IX. I mean, there's a bunch of different federal education programs, and I wasn't saying or implying that those should lapse. I guess I was just saying, oftentimes when new administrations come in, they want to put their stamp on education with some new programs, with some innovative programs, with just something that's like, this is our thing. This is what we think is going to work. I've not really seen or heard any of those that particularly excite me. I couldn't even name 5 off the top of my head, I don't think. And so that's why I said, in that sense, the sort of DeVos era where there wasn't, although yes, I do believe as a whole she was harmful to public education, certainly in her platform and the way that she spoke about public schools. The fact that there was, although she tried but failed to enact large scale ed reform was in some ways nice or was in some way fine.
Yeah.
And that was just my point was, new regime, new programs. What is it?
I get it. And as educators, we've all lived through new programs, and at times those feel onerous and like a burden. But I think, we could think beyond programs though, and we could also think about policy. Over the last 4 years, not only did that administration gut the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, but it gutted civil rights policy in the Department of Education. Yeah. And I think there's a role for, like Dr. Fenwick, as you've mentioned, Casey, the assault on Brown versus Board and how that's happened over the decades in ways that you can't even really tell it's an assault, but it is. I mean, we've talked about the resegregation of public schools on this show ad nauseum for 4 years. I mean, I think the Department of Ed can have a very active role, not just in spending money, but in legislation and policy that is pro-public school and supports public schools and students who have been traditionally underserved.
Yeah, and I did read that the Biden administration is expecting even departments that would not have necessarily have a connection to maybe climate change legislation and policy, but they should have that in their actual policies and actual practices and departments. And I think that would be a really important part of the Department of Education's, guidance to schools for science education and history education and teaching climate change and pushing the fact that we are facing this existential crisis. So I think there's a lot of real positive power that can come from that role.
I'm after we've had this discussion, I'm kind of psyched about these folks.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially, I think Casey's got me on the Fenwick train now.
All right, yeah, on the Dr. and Dr. Fenwick is local. I mean,
she is. Yeah.
Howard, that living in the area, I think she would be a great pick. All right, so stay tuned. By the next episode in the new year in 21. We'll talk about the new education secretary, won't we, fellas?
Yeah, and we're gonna get somebody on. I just decided this 5 seconds ago. Once it's named, we're gonna get somebody on from the Department of Ed to answer all these questions that we just brought up about what's gonna happen.
All right.
Their first 100 days.
You're known for booking great guests, so.
Yeah, I do book great guests. You're right. Thank you. Put a lot of work into that.
Mr. Siddons, Mr. Crable, he is a killer guest booker, isn't he?
He is.
Guest booker.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Casey. All right, let's do a few updates before we close the show. Mr. Siddons, how's your interview pod series going? I can't for the life of me remember the name of it. And when is it going to be?
It's called the Pandemic Pass. It's probably going to be debuting in January.
Okay, nice.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And since we're building our media empire, do we have any other updates on some of our brother or sister pods that
we do not. Those are very close to the vest, but we will discuss those off air.
All right. One
thing I've discovered is it's very hard to do a podcast when you're not the one doing it. You're like, oh, I don't control everything. Okay.
Yeah. Makes it a little challenging.
All right. The holidays are here. Christmas is a week away. When this episode comes out, it'll just be a few days away. Mr. Krabs, you first. Do you all celebrate Christmas in the house? What do you do in the Crable household?
Yeah. I am not religious, even as far away as you can be, but I do. Love
Christmas is such a religious holiday, Peter.
I know. I love the pagan rituals. We.
What about Hanukkah?
Yeah, so this year was the first year where we really kind of did some candle lighting, and Jenna bought dreidels and some gelt for the kids, and spun some dreidels, and the kids asked 100,000 times if they could eat the chocolate, and we screamed no at them, and then they ate it anyway. So it was just a success all around. Had some latkes one night, so yeah, it was good. And so growing up, my family is from Ohio. So we would always go and spend like Christmas Eve with my mom's family and Christmas Day with my dad's family. So this year, we're going to have like a big Christmas Eve dinner. And then we're going to do the Jewish Christmas Day and do Chinese takeout and a movie.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. But you're not going to, are you doing the ticed pandemic rules of no extended family, just
my dad and stepmom, who are local here, are going to come over.
Nice.
Hopefully my brother doesn't listen to the pod, because they were originally supposed to go out to San Francisco to see him, but just didn't seem like a good idea. So I don't want him getting all bitter that they're going to be coming here instead.
Nice.
Whoops.
Well, that'll be nice. All right. CH Siddons, are you traveling to West Virginia?
I think so. We'll see. We're going to get tested next week, and stay there for a week or two. I don't know.
And this is Frida's second Christmas.
That's right. Except last year we had no snow, so she hasn't experienced snow yet until yesterday.
So
nice.
Pearl, she was live whatever when it snowed 2 years ago, but she yesterday she was very excited, but she kept calling it sand. Let's go play in the sand. I was like, no, dear, snow. And she was like, yeah, let's go throw sand. And I was like, okay, all right.
What about you?
Tell us about the Dodd family. The Dodd family does Christmas pretty big.
Yeah, Santa's up there on the roof. You guys have seen Santa on the roof before, right?
Yeah.
I have to say.
Do you go up there and do that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I don't know. I think this may have been the last year.
I was going to say that should have been done years ago.
Yeah, at 52 years of age, when you only get up on a ladder, even if it's only about 15 feet off the ground, but when you only do it once a year, it's not like it's It doesn't feel very comfortable.
No.
The key part is the pivot from the top rung onto the roof, where you got to swing the leg over.
Now, does your 17-year-old son spot you perchance and hold the ladder for you?
No, I make my wife stands at the bottom and digs her foot into the bottom rung.
All right.
Wow.
That's good.
So Santa's up. I'm not going to be doing the ladder next year. This is it. I think we're just hanging out. It's the four of us. We're not going to see anybody. It's a bummer. We always, my siblings, we rotate years on Christmas Eve. The 6 grandkids, the 6 cousins, and the 3 original Dodd children, old grown-up children now. And then Christmas Day, we're just going to cook and be here together and have a nice time. It'll be nice. I don't know about you, Crable. You only have Frida, but literally the dog barks every hour because there's 5 new packages on the porch every hour.
Yeah.
And I can just hear it, just cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
They've become fast and furious the last couple of days, and I don't have to quite worry about like hiding stuff. I mean, like I put it away, but like they don't even know that they're supposed to look yet for them. You know?
Oh yeah.
And we used to always have presents wrapped and out like under the tree. But I just do not trust my children at all to
they're not going to be safe if you
yeah. I mean, I used to like definitely open them, and
You did?
I would you like massage the tape like a little bit. I would never go so far as
devilish.
I would never go so far as like rip the tape off, but if it was like a little loose, maybe I would try and work a centimeter or 2 a day to.
There's
the Peter
always
Crable
one
youth
kid
stories
in the family.
the Peter Crable youth stories are fascinating to me. They don't come out often.
Didn't you have a brother, Mr. Siddons? And it's usually the middle child, so it might have been you. My sister was an inveterate peeker.
No.
Was there any of the 3 of you?
Nope.
Were you present seekers at least?
I don't remember doing that, but I think maybe I did at some point, but I could never find them.
My mom used to have to move them around constantly because my sister was just she knew, like when I would show her stuff excitedly on Christmas morning when I would open it, I'd be like, look, and she would look at it. I know she had seen it.
Oh, what a jerk.
I know. I mean, she was completely she was a total snoop. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. It is time, right? We need it.
It's time. Yep. Enjoy.
Yeah. All those educators out there, support staff, teachers, principals, central office people. Everybody's been working around the clock since March to deal with the pandemic, and I know it's going to be a nice break. I'm just looking forward to not looking at the screen.
Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah.
All right. As always, there's an awful picture of me taken on Zoom in the show notes. Thanks, Mr. Siddons.
You're welcome.
Ed's Not Dead is brought to you by Pulp Education, a full-service educational media company specializing in leadership, instruction, and 21st century school reform. You can always catch us on Twitter at Ed's Not Dead PC, and check out the website, edsnotdead.com. Fellas, in the spirit of the season, I am so grateful for what's our friendship go back to now? 2012, 8 years?
2011.
We're coming up on a decade.
I had 0 children.
Yeah, you had 0 children. Mr. Siddons, you didn't even have a girlfriend. We won't even go into your past.
I did have a girlfriend then.
Not when you weren't dating Sarah when I
was the summer. Yes, I was. It was
really
summer of that year was the first dates.
The summer you started?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Okay. All right.
And so I remember it very distinctly because I was itinerant worker in that summer, and Sarah was, of course, working full time, and I would go down to visit her in DC, and we'd go out on Wednesday night, Thursday night. I didn't have work, the next day, and she did every day. She's like, she told me years later, she's like, it was tiring. I had to go to work every day. We can't go out to restaurants every night. Like, why not?
You were living the dream then.
I was, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the friendship continues, and we look forward to another year of the pod. Right? We're still.
That's right.
Is this season 4? This is season 4.
This is season 4.
All right. All right.
As
well,
you all know, we're not episodic.
We're not. I know. Well, I did get away from the episodes, right?
I know. I'm proud of you.
All right. Well, to our listeners, so all you out there, we hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks for the support. Thanks for listening to the pod. Spread the word about Ed's Not Dead. And we will catch everybody in 2021. For Peter and Casey, thanks for listening, and peace out.